Broadcast with some breaking inputs that have just come in the last few minutes. This is what the health ministry in the Gaza Strip has said, that there's been yet another attack by the Israelis, and this time it targeted a United Nations run school that has been bombed by the Israeli forces. And according to the latest draft that is coming in, at least about 50 Palestinian civilians, including many children, reportedly have been massacred inside the premises of this United Nations run school. Now, the strike is said to have been on the United Nations-run Al-Aqsa school in the Jabalia refugee camp. Thousands of people had in fact taken refuge inside of this United Nations Al-Aqsa school in the Jabalia refugee camp because their homes had already been destroyed. These unsuspecting Palestinian civilians inside the United Nations-run school were hit with an Israeli bomb in just the last few minutes. And this, of course, is the latest information that has now come in. The airstrikes on the residential blocks in the southern part of Gaza have also resulted in deaths of at least about 32 other Palestinians. And remember, Israel has been carrying on with its campaign of relentlessly bombing the Gaza Strip, and overnight there were several attacks that were staged on the southern Gazan city of Khan Yunis, where Israel has demanded that all Palestinians should in fact flee from. And according to reports that have come in, 26 people were killed while 23 others were severely injured in another bomb that was dropped by Israel. And Israel is steadily expanding its ground offensive, and according to reports that have come in, at least about 5 Palestinians were killed and several others were wounded in West Bank in a drone strike. Now, the Israeli army raids have been targeting the Palestinians ever since this bout of violence broke out on the 7th of October. Now, the Hamas-run health ministry has said that at least about 120 people who were wounded are still at the facility, along with an unspecified number of premature babies, adding that it is in touch with the Red Cross and the Red Crescent about the infants at the Al-Shifa hospital, from where there is again an exodus taking place. The tensions are on the rise along the Lebanese-Israel border as well, where the Iran-backed Hezbollah group and Israel have traded rocket and missile fire. Hezbollah has said that it has shot down an Israeli drone near the border, and Israel's military says that it has intercepted a missile that was fired at an Israeli drone. Meanwhile, a first batch of fuel entered into the Gaza Strip from Egypt under an Israel-US deal, where about 17,000 litres of fuel for telecommunications has now passed through the Rafah border crossing in a bid to try and end the communications blackout that has halted 8 convoys for well over 2 days. Now, with the worries of children's safety in Gaza mounting, the first plane carrying about 15 people from the Gaza Strip, including children and their families, arrived in the United Arab Emirates. The flight is part of the UAE President's initiative to provide some medical assistance for about 1,000 children from the Gaza Strip. Separately, talks around the war continue in Israel. The Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has hosted his French counterpart in Tel Aviv, and the two discussed humanitarian issues of the hostages held by Hamas. The duo also shared operational achievements and developments on the ground. Meanwhile, the American President Joe Biden has again pressed for the immediate release of hostages during talks with the Qatari leadership. The Bahrain's Crown Prince has called for a hostage exchange between Hamas and Israel in order to achieve a breakthrough in the hostilities. The Prince has unequivocally condemned the 7th of October attack and the Israeli air campaign of relentlessly bombing the Gaza Strip that has followed ever since then. Meanwhile, in Israel, families of those who are presently held hostage marched on the highway demanding for accountability from their Prime Minister, who they say has done precious little in trying to secure the release of hostages who are presently in the custody of Hamas. Now, this is a 5-day-long march which is ending today. It started from Tel Aviv, where they're calling on the Israeli government to secure the release of an estimated 240 Israeli hostages. The protesters are walking towards the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office. They're asking him to hasten the process of securing the release of the hostages. All right, now to give us insights in terms of what is happening at this moment within the Gaza Strip, we're being joined by Motea Ibrahim, who is a Palestinian journalist who is based out of the central area of the Gaza Strip. Now, Motea Ibrahim, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on WION. Now, we are hearing reports that people are still fleeing from the Al-Shifa hospital. This even after Israel came forth with a clarification, denying reports that it had given an ultimatum to everyone within the Al-Shifa hospital to in fact leave from there. What are you picking up from the ground?
Yes, first of all, thank you for having me. Actually, the situation as you are following is catastrophic at all levels, as you have mentioned that the Israeli occupation forces forcibly expelled the Palestinian people, including the Palestinian evacuees who were taking Shifa Hospital as the shelter, in addition to the Palestinian patients and injured people inside Shifa. They were totally expelled under the demands of the Israeli occupation forces. We are talking about about 5,000 Palestinians have been evacuated and forcibly expelled out of the Shifa hospital complex. In addition to that, those numbers actually, including 500 Palestinian patients and Palestinian wounded people, they were totally unable to move or to walk on their legs out of the complex, but the Israeli occupation threatened them to shoot them dead. So they found themselves obliged and imposed to leave the Shifa under those threats and under those demands. In addition to that, there are hundreds of the Palestinian patients and injured people are still located inside the Shifa complex, as they are not able completely to move a step on the ground. In addition to that, we have multiple premature babies are still inside the incubators, in addition to the patients of the IC units. So, apparently we are in front of another war crime committed by the Israeli occupation.
Absolutely, indeed. And also, Motea, tell us a bit about what the situation is in the place where you are at this moment. You're in fact in front of the Al-Aqsa Hospital. What is the situation like out there, and how badly have the medical facilities in the Gaza been hit?
Yes, regarding the situation here in the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital, it is getting worse and worse with every moment passing, actually, because as you know that the Israeli warcrafts maintain their attacks and their incursions on several areas across Gaza Strip, particularly the central area. Literally, the last night was bloody for the Palestinian people. It was tough as the Israeli occupation over the night maintained the airstrikes against the residential buildings and the civilian houses, not only in the central area of Gaza Strip. In the northern part of Gaza Strip, the Israeli occupation forces committed a massacre by killing more than 65 Palestinians, mostly women and children, and they were brought to the Indonesian hospital. And in Gaza City, inside Gaza City, we are talking about more 40 Palestinians have been reported killed after the Israeli tanks surrounded their buildings and claimed their lives. In the central area of Gaza Strip, we are talking about more 6 Palestinians were killed by the Israeli occupation forces after the Israeli warcrafts targeted a residential building in the central area in Deir al-Balah city. Just a couple of hours ago, the Israeli occupation forces claimed the life of 27 Palestinians in Khan Yunis city, southern Gaza Strip. These are the areas that the Israeli occupation forces claim they are safe. Now the Israeli occupation are still committing more massacres and genocides against the Palestinian civilians who mostly evacuated from the northern part and Gaza City to those areas. So we are in front of a continuous pogrom committed left, right, and center against the Palestinian civilians.
Right. Thank you very much indeed, Motea Ibrahim, for joining us from Gaza and getting us the details of what is in fact unfolding there at this moment. And also on this broadcast, we're now being joined by Mr. Edward P. Joseph. He's joining us from Washington, D.C. in the United States. He's a conflict management expert and also a foreign policy lecturer and an analyst. Now, Mr. Joseph, we've been witnessing what's been happening in the last 24, 48 hours, and the Al-Shifa Hospital, the biggest medical center in the Gaza Strip, has been at the center of what's in fact been unfolding there. Now, for the last fortnight, we've been hearing from the Israeli Defense Forces that Hamas has got its command center. The hospital was raided. But now, what is interesting is the comment that's been made by the former Israeli Prime Minister, Ehud Olmert, who says that Hamas's command center is not under the Al-Shifa Hospital, but actually in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. What do you make of that?
I'm not sure what to make of former Prime Minister Olmert's comment. I know that the Israeli Defense Forces brought journalists to the site of the Al-Shifa Hospital, and they showed them evidence of what the IDF claims is a Hamas military center and fortification of some point, including showing them the tunnel that was on the premises. This was reported in the New York Times, who confirmed that there is this opening of the tunnel on the premises of the Al-Shifa Hospital, along with
but the New York Times has also raised, and indeed a lot of other media outlets around the world, including some of the most leading media outlets, have raised questions about what was claimed by the Israeli Defense Forces existed under the Al-Shifa Hospital and the number of weapons that they actually managed to retrieve from there. And the tunnel that you're talking about was found about 30 odd meters outside the building of Al-Shifa and not underneath the building of Al-Shifa.
That's the New York Times has reported that these were the reporters who were there on the site. So you and I were not there, Mohammed, but these reporters were for the New York Times, and they report that it was on the premises of the Al-Shifa Hospital, and that was the claim of the IDF.
And they've raised questions about the evidence that's been put forth.
Let me answer your other question about the challenges to the reports. Of course, there was a report on BBC falsely which claimed that the Israelis had come in and targeted Arab translators and others. And of course, the BBC was forced to retract that embarrassingly, had to issue an immediate apology. So we know here, of course, and there was the other famous case of the Al-Hali Hospital in Gaza City, which was falsely blamed on an Israeli strike, Mohammed, which you know accurately because you do report news accurately, and you know that was actually caused by a Palestinian strike, and you know as well, Mohammed.
You're referring to the Al-Ahli Baptist strike, that is what the Israelis and
you know those were vastly inflated.
Mr. Joseph, instead of talking about what the different media portals around the world are reporting, I want your opinion on the Israeli tactics that are playing out at this moment. What we are witnessing is that the health infrastructure and hospitals at this moment are at the forefront of the battle lines here. When the Al-Ahli bombing, in fact, took place about four odd weeks ago, Israel said that it does not target hospitals because that simply is not what it does, because that is tantamount to a war crime. But now it is saying that Hamas has got its hideouts and its headquarters underneath the hospitals in the Gaza Strip. And once the Al-Shifa Hospital was raided, we saw what in fact came out of it. But the collateral damage that has been inflicted on the Palestinian people is just simply enormous. So the question that I want to ask you is, how convinced are you with this Israeli strategy of going after the health infrastructure in the Gaza Strip, saying that Hamas is hiding there?
Well, I'm not here to give my opinion. I'm here to analyze what we know, Mohammed, along with you, because neither you or I are here to give our opinions. So what we know is that these are the facts that we know. We know this, which has not come up in your reporting today, Mohammed. I'm surprised to hear that, which is that Hamas launched this war on October 7th. And when we use the word massacre, we can accurately use that word when it comes to Hamas, because you know, Mohammed, that Hamas did with personally smiling, reporting, taking videos. This is recorded on video of atrocities such as taking an Israeli baby, putting that baby in an oven and turning that baby on. Now that's a massacre, shooting parents in front of the children. Hamas doing that. Mohammed, you know that. Mohammed, you know that. Those are massacres. Those are massacres.
Just in the last less than an hour, Mr. Joseph, my question to you is this. It is important to question the massacres that are happening. It is important to condemn what is happening. And it is important that we look at both sides of the story. It's good that you brought up the 7th of October attack by Hamas, but would you also condemn what has happened, where civilians have been massacred inside the Gaza Strip. In the last 1 hour, there have been 2 airstrikes on a school, a United Nations-run school, in which the death toll of Palestinian civilians, including many children, has now gone up to 80.
Okay, Mohammed, let's turn to that now. And you're absolutely right. We need to look at both sides, but your report did not do that. So I was doing that. I was supplying that balance, which those are hands-on massacres. Israel is undertaking a military operation of war. The United States, President Biden has insisted from the beginning that Israel must comply with international law. And Israel is under intense scrutiny and must, and I agree with you, must abide by principles of international law which protect hospitals. And you're absolutely right to point that out. And let's all have sympathy and empathy for the plight of Palestinian civilians. And let's consider again, Mohammed, what is the most immediate way to alleviate that suffering? And if Hamas would release the hostages that it criminally seized, those 240 hostages,
Joseph, I'll come to the hostages in a bit.
This suffering of the Palestinian civilians would stop, Mohammed. So let's remember that as we continue our deserved focus on the plight of trapped Palestinian civilians there in Gaza.
Mr. Joseph, you've been joining us as a guest right from the 7th of October onwards, on the day that Hamas staged the attack. We sat here and we discussed what happened in Israel that was committed by Hamas. So the coverage that you're talking about, we've been looking at what is happening on the both sides. But the question that needs to be looked at today is what is happening today. And what is happening today, quite clearly, a United Nations-run school was attacked in which there were a number of Palestinian civilians. There are children in those images. We can't even show you because that is how gruesome those images are. With this being the case, I want to ask you a larger question here. The tactics that Israel is adopting, it says that it wants to go after Hamas, but the number of civilians who are getting killed is just enormous. 12,000 Palestinians being killed. What is Israel achieving militarily out of this, and is it losing the perception war?
Well, I tell you, Mohammed, it's a very fair question. Everyone has to be not just concerned, but heartbroken by the deaths of Palestinian civilians, innocent Palestinian civilians, above all, children being killed. All of us have to be concerned about that. We have to, again, remind ourselves and ask ourselves what can be done about that. Israel has to be held accountable under international law, as President Biden has said, as Secretary of State Blinken has said. But what we don't hear on this school report, I agree with you that it sounds terribly tragic. I'm searching on Google News. I don't see much reporting about it. I'm not saying it's not true, but I certainly don't see.
It's happened in the last 1 hour, Mr. Joseph. I'm pretty sure you'll read about it and see the images in just some time. But the images, let me assure you, are so horrific that none of the big mainstream media channels will even put it out on television.
I understand, but I'm just reporting the facts here, Mohammed. This sounds terrible. It would be tragic, and it sounds Israel would definitely have to be held accountable and answer questions. Why on earth would it make such a strike? But again, I'm searching here on Google News, and I don't see much reporting about that other than on Al Jazeera. So we have to, but you're absolutely right. We need to, Mohammed, absolutely keep the focus on the plight of Palestinian civilians and ask ourselves, who is responsible for that? Is it only the Israelis, or does Hamas bear responsibility? And could Hamas alleviate the suffering of Palestinian civilians by simply releasing those hostages that it's holding?
Mr. Joseph, I think we are completely out of time. Thank you very much indeed for joining us from Washington, D.C. and getting us your perspective there.
You're welcome.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.